Hey guys, and welcome to IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad. And I just got it. It's on sale on Steam right now for about 30 bucks. You get 10 planes, which really 2 of them are just variations. So you really get 9 actual variations of planes, including German and Russian aircraft on the Stalingrad front that fought during World War II. Now, this is really the roots of IL-2. If you remember when it first came out back in, I think, 2002 or so, it started at the Battle of Stalingrad, and this is a very famous Russian war. The heroes of Russia come from this era, and it is it's one of the most acclaimed kind of wars, probably the most acclaimed battle of Russian history, and that's captured in movies like that one with the sniper enemy at the gates. You kind of see the heroes of Stalingrad. So let's get right into the sim, and first off I just want to do some control settings with you. So this is kind of an introduction slash maybe review, but more of a just kind of my first impressions of IL-2. It's been out for a few years, and obviously it had the competitor called Cliffs of Dover, which unfortunately had some issues. And I talked about it in other videos. The A-Tag team created some patches, and it's pretty good, but I still have performance issues. Like, this game looks pretty much identical, if not probably better than Cliffs of Dover, even with the patches that the team patches that were created. But it still has issues with performance. But this one, I'm getting 60 frames a second, I think, high settings, so that's pretty good. It's pretty well optimized. Another thing, whether you're loading into the aircraft or you're just getting into the game, it's extremely quick. Let me preface this with saying this is 777 Studios, which did create Rise of Flight, which is an incredibly optimized flight simulator. You get great performance, even though you need a little bit of a beastly system, like an ARMA system, to run it. It still gives you great bang for your buck. It looks great. Same thing with this one. So you do need a higher-end system to run this type of stuff. I imagine if you can run DCS and you can run FSX with add-ons like Rex and UTX and other airport add-ons, you should be okay to run this perfectly fine. Alright, so let's get into some controls, because this is one of the main kind of complaints that I've heard, and that's with the axes control. So let's start with pitch here. Obviously you're going to assign your axes. You go to this little graph, and I'll go ahead and move my my axes here for pitch. So what I've done is, if you pay attention to this curve, this is the same thing that we did with DCS. So if you look at my DCS joystick and joystick curves tutorial, it's the same concept. And if you start off, you're going to start off right here with just a linear curve, okay? And the complaint is that the aircraft feel kind of kitey is probably the best word. I think Ape of the Year explained it as being kitey. So let's try to fix that. This was also a problem with DCS, where the aircraft felt kind of floaty and light in the middle. So what you want to do is, at least for my joystick settings, I'm going to crank the sensitivity all the way up, because I want this nice curve to be here. Okay, just like in DCS, just like we did in DCS. And then I'm going to, if you pay attention to the middle here, this flattens out the middle. That's the dead zone, or the null zone. Okay, so I have mines at something like, I think I had it at 70%. Okay, and what this does, that curve, it gives you a much nicer kind of beefy feel, heavier feel to the aircraft. You actually feel like it has weight to it. Now, it might be different for your settings, but just go ahead and try these curves out. So I did this with the, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of dead zone on the edges, so that I don't get a whole lot of maximum response. I'll do 50%. Okay, and for the roll axis, it's the same exact thing. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. Add a little bit of maximum. Alright. And the reason I did that, just so you know, is when the aircraft airspeed increases to a certain point, you can't fully deflect the controls. So let's say the aileron, let's say you're on the ground, there's no wind, you can deflect it all the way. That's fine. But when you're going like, 300 miles an hour, even with hydraulic pressures, you may only get the control to go, that far, or even maybe that far, or something like that. Because you got to understand, the wind is causing extreme pressure on those control surfaces, your ailerons, your elevators, and they're not going to move, full deflection like they do in on the ground where there's no air pressure on them. So I hope that makes sense. Your aileron's only going to move maybe this much if you're like 300 miles an hour arbitrarily, but if you're on the ground, it's going to move all the way. Hope that makes sense. So that's why I kind of limit my maximum here just a little bit. All right, let's get into the aircraft. If you're familiar with IL-2 1946, Rise of Flight, Cliffs of Dover, all these controls are pretty much the same. Obviously, you want your control, pitch, roll, yaw. You also want your trim to be properly set up. And then I personally, your weapon systems, those are kind of like the essentials. I personally like some views and my HOTAS setup. And that's about it. You should be ready to go. Alright guys, so let's get in the aircraft here. And this has a typical IL-2 start, which honestly I don't mind, because if you look on the right hand side, I do have some notices enabled. And check out how much actual preparation it takes. Would I like to do this? Sure, I'd like to do it. Maybe not every time, but it is pretty complicated, and no different than maybe a complicated BMS start or an A2A start in FSX. But you do have to prime the engine, as you can see him doing there. And go ahead and turns the batteries on, radio on. It turns on the magnetos, which are right there, and cranks the engine on. So, you may like that, you may not, and I didn't get a good start on this one, just like in Rise of Flight. I think the reason that the IL-2 and 1C developers kept this start simple is because it really eliminates a large part of the audience. Now, if you're a pilot, like I am, or you just have been doing simming for a long time and you're basically a pilot, you kind of like doing the startup. It's pretty fun, but sometimes you just want to get in the aircraft, let the pilot do what he would do in World War II, and mess with all these switches and get the aircraft started. But it is kind of fun. So it would be nice to see a clickable cockpit. I'm not sure if that's in their vision. I didn't have a problem with it in Rise of Flight because there's not, basically there's fuel, magnetos, and that's it. World War II, it's a little more, or a lot more involved, obviously. Let's see if we can get a good start here. All right, so he's got the magnetos, fuel valves open, pneumatic system. Wonder if he'll prime it again. Yep, he's going to prime it. So the other thing is, understand it's extremely cold in Stalingrad right now, so these cold weather starts are very difficult. I've personally sat in a Cessna on a cold weather day and tried starting like 6-7 times and had a really hard time doing it. So in this type of aircraft, it's going to be even more complicated. Alright, so one trick is to make sure that you keep your engine cracked just a little bit on start. And died on me again. Let's see if I can get a good start, and then I'll come back in here. Alright, so I finally got a good start here, and it just takes a few tries. One thing I'd like you guys to notice, I'm going to slow time down, just like you can in IL-2. Check out the individual firings of the engine there, of the cylinders. That's pretty wild. So, alright, let's speed time back up. Alright, so depending on whether you have, I'm running full realism except for a couple of things, but I do have full engine management on. So if you have an axis for your pitch, you want to model that, as well as your the mixture control is that lever right there. So I'm just going to go a little bit lean here, and make sure you crack the throttle. A good practice is to kind of just rotate the throttle when you get in the aircraft, kind of like in BMS. Alright, so if you notice that symbol on the right hand of the screen, there's a little snowflake there. that tells me that my engine's cold, which is kind of nice. But you know, obviously you can look at the temperature gauge down there on the right there in the center, and you want that to be at least 25 degrees Celsius, you know, before you really start doing anything, and that should go away. So a great way to do that is if you have your radiator mapped, as well as your so there's two radiators that you control in this, which is new. In the previous IL-2s you can only control one, but you have your water radiator and your oil radiator, and what I've done is I've mapped them to the same exact controls, so you can see both wheels are turning at the same time. And you can do that, you can double map buttons. So what I'm going to do is actually close them all the way, okay? And the reason for that, it kind of sounds crazy, because when you start an engine, especially World War II, you know, high horsepower engine, you want the radiator full open, the water radiator full open. But again, understand that the temperature is extremely cold right now. So we want that radiator closed so that we don't get maximum cooling, and it'll rapidly help our engine temperature climb up. All right. And the other thing you want to do, you know, I run at about 20% throttle, or something like, I forget what the RPM is. There's the RPM right there. Maybe 700 RPM or so, just to get it warmed up. And you'll see the temperature rapidly increase. So at this point, you know, we gave it a nice little warm up. We can start taxiing out to the runway and continue to let the engine warm up. Just takes a little bit of power. And I'll tell you right now, the ground physics for this are truly remarkable. I do have the tail wheel locked, and I'll show you the tail wheel control is down here. You can see by the left side of the seat there. I keep it locked in the yak here, because it really has a tendency to not want to go, or to ground loop. So you got to be really careful when you choose to unlock it. If you know you can go ahead and do that, but for the most part, I'm going to cut across the snow here. For the most part, you want to just keep that locked. So I'll show you something really cool. You can actually plow through the snow in this. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see that in the video, but we're actually in a couple inches of snow here, and you can see the track marks. Track marks on the snow, which is pretty cool. I'll try to show you from inside the cockpit. You can see the yeah, there's the track right there. Alright. Alright, so just getting back to the taxiway here. So it's cool that you can actually taxi off-road, so to speak, because World War II aircraft do this all the time. You know, you got to go slow, and you want to keep, you know, moving. You don't want to get stuck or bogged down or something. But in previous titles, like especially IL-2 1946, you are, if you go off-road, you're going to be rolling like something crazy. All right, track hour really helps because you can look over the nose, which is nice. Okay, tail wheel's locked. I'm going to go ahead and close the canopy. And one thing that's cool is you can't lean outside anymore. It blocks you from doing that, so that's nice. All right. So the engine, you can see, is pretty warmed up now. I think we were good for a little bit. See, we're just past 25, and the radiator's still full closed. All right. Yeah, we were good while we were running the engine up. I'll put the brakes here. Okay, so while we do that, I am going to go ahead and throw the radiator full open once I get my temperature up. All right, so there it just went away, that snowflake. So it looks more like 27 Celsius is where you want it to be. All right, so before we take off, tail wheel is locked. I'll double check that. you want to make sure that your mixture is full rich, and your propeller pitch has to be 100%. Alright, and the trim, I use about 30 to 50%. So it's nice having those little indicators, because, you know, the tactile feel of a World War II pilot where you could just kind of, you know, muscle memory, you don't have that in the sim. And this allows you to do that. Just kind of set it where you want it. Alright, this is a short field takeoff, and it seems like a lot of these fields are short. You can see there's not a whole lot of runway here, so we're going to do our short field takeoff procedure. We're not going to use any flaps, but we are going to use full RPM before we let the brakes go. Alright, there we go. And full left rudder. I am going to purposefully push the nose down. There we go. And the key here, there's a lot of wobbling on takeoff that I've... Oh, great. Pushing those way too down. Alright, try this again. Alright guys, so we're going to try this takeoff again. And I'm going to keep the trim actually a little bit neutral. See if I can get this nose down properly. Alright, full left rudder. And here we go. Alright, picking up some good speed. And the good thing is to just focus on something far away and keep that centered, and you should be fine. Instead of focusing on the cockpit during takeoff, focus on those trees and try to keep them nice and straight. Alright, so gear up. Awesome. Alright, so we're just going to do a quick pattern around here. This is just a basic introduction to the IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad. And right off the bat, I mean, the legacy of Rise of Flight is clearly here. Let me go ahead and close the cockpit just so you guys can hear me a little better. The legacy of Rise of Flight is clearly here. Definitely feels good, especially after you adjust those curves. It's hard to explain. It's hard to really tell you, you know, why this feels closer to flight than, say, you know, IL-2 1946. Well, IL-2 1946. It clearly is. It feels like flying on rails compared to this. But this is, you know, a lot closer to DCS or A2A. Similar feeling as Rise of Flight. Obviously, these aircraft have a lot more performance and power. But essentially, the flight feeling is pretty the same. Cliffs of Dover, surprisingly, is pretty close to this, but I think this is even better as far as the feeling of flight, and that's something that Rise of Flight has done incredibly well. Bring the RPM back just a little bit. So yeah, that, you know, there's not too much I can say. It really is similar to close to Dover as far as the flight models and things like that, but it just feels just a little an edge beyond that. Do a little flyby here. Alright, we'll head back to the runway for landing. So far I'm pretty impressed by it. It's probably the cheapest you're going to get it for. $30 includes 10 planes, and obviously the map battle in Stalingrad. But I can tell you this, compared to FSX, you know, for one aircraft like this, let's say you brought the Yak in FSX by some third-party company, and it was this fidelity. Yeah, you can't click on anything, but, you know, all the engine controls are there, mixture, prop, radiator, all that stuff, all the fun stuff's there. Fair market value or retail value, I'd probably pay $50 for the quality of aircraft. So for $30, you're getting 10 aircraft in A2A quality. You can't beat that. And they have weapons. You know, this is a combat sim. That's the limitation of FSX, is that you can't, you know, fire weapons with TAC Pack. It's changing that, but you know, it's really in its infancy. Where IL-2 has been making this game and modifying this engine for, you know, the last 20 years or close to 20 years. So the damage modeling is unbelievable. You know, if you think IL-2 is great or Rise of Flight, it's in the spirit of Rise of Flight, that awesome damage model. Alright, we'll get the gear down, flaps down. And do not be deceived, you know, this is not a arcade flight sim by any means. Even though you don't have the clickable cockpit, you know, I keep saying it, the IL-2 series has the closest representation of flight that I've experienced in flight simulators. Alright, let's go ahead and slow this baby up. Use a lot of up trim. I'm shooting for about 200 kilometers an hour. And understand, you know, this is a short field. It's not a long field by any means. So you want to come in really slow, as slow as you possibly can. And then just kind of use the throttle to finesse it down here. A little more power. You do want to land with power on. That's kind of one of the things I'm learning about World War II aircraft. They do not like closed throttle on the landing. So nice and smooth, get a nice touchdown. And once you get the wheels on the ground, a little bounce there. Once you get the wheels on the ground, then go ahead and close the throttle. A little bit of a bounce there. Oh, and that landing sucked. Sorry, guys. Alright, guys, we're going to try this again. I got the pitch trim all the way up at 100% up just to help me in the landing here. Coming in at 200 kilometers an hour. Nice and slow. Alright, I'll keep a little bit of power on during the touchdown. A little bit of a bounce. And push the nose forward just a little bit. Alright. Alright, I'll get the stick all the way back here. Engage some of the brakes. Alright, cool. Yeah, so landings are a little bit tricky. The flight model is a lot more intense than IL-2 1946, that's for sure. But fairly close to Cliffs of Dover. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed that basic introduction. And I'll probably be doing maybe some more test flights, maybe start the campaign and showcase Battle of Stalingrad. So check it out on Steam or the developer page. And hope you guys buy it. It's a really good deal for what you get. Alright, burner out. See you guys next time.